Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Sarutobi was bound by a set of chakra-enhanced chains that probably wouldn't break, even if Tsunade was using her super strength. He had chakra-suppressing seals all across his chest. Surrounding him was a special division of the Anbu Black Ops, Musayoru, Silent Knight. They were the most dangerous members of the Black Ops. They were completely loyal to the Hokage, and no other. Not even Kakashi was good enough to be placed in their ranks. He was in a holding cell made out of a special chakra-draining rock. Just beyond the 3-inch thick wall of chakra-eating rock, there was a set of bars and wires that reinforced the wall itself. And finally after that was a 12-inch thick wall of concrete. The only hole in the cell's perfect hold was the door in and out, but that door was made out of a steel that could endure 100 of Tsunade's most powerful punches, and it was constantly being pumped with Kaden chakra, making it impossible to open from the inside. All in all, a nearly perfect cell. There had been one person to escape from this cell, and he had died right after he made it 3 feet from the cell. Sarutobi was being bound by his ankles, wrists, and thighs. His head was held in place, and on his back was a special device. It would quickly pump chakra directly into his chakra system if the interrogator gave the order. Now why would this be bad? Well, inserting another person's chakra into another is a very painful process for the receiver, especially from where this chakra came from. The chakra was specially harvested by Oinen, Hunter Nin, who would use special chakra holding cases to bring in chakra for the device. All in all, since the chakra being shoved into a person is not from one person, but many, it would severely hurt. Sarutobi looked at the ground as he thought of what had happened. Not even 20 minutes ago he had been at home, writing his memoirs. The next minute he had been arrested for treason. What evidence did Minato have to support this? No, Minato would not have looked in storage, not when he had his own desk. Before Sarutobi could continue his thoughts, the door to the cell opened, and he was shocked and terrified at who came in. Anko Mitarashi, finest torture specialist of her generation, she knew every pressure point on the body, and where every nerve connected. Inoichi Yamanaka, an interrogator that had been famed throughout the elemental countries. And the worst of them all, Ibiki Morino, the only interrogator who has had the pleasure of making a cage squeal for their life. Following the 3 interrogators was an extremely pissed off Minato, and a fuming Kushina. Minato turned to the Anbu station just outside the door. Lock it down. No one goes in or out of this room without my say-so. Kill anyone that attempts to interrupt us. The Anbu bowed and quickly locked down the doors. Minato glared at the Sandaime. I was willing to pass by not telling Naruto about us. I really was, but not this. He pulled out a pile of documents. What I have found here is treason. No, beyond treason. This is genocide. Minato walked up to Sarutobi. Shall we see what you have done? Oh, I think we shall. Minato stood back up and flipped to the first page. Let's start with this. Minato pulled out a document, and placed it directly in front of the Sandaime's face, shocking Sarutobi to the core. It was an order that all the orphanages were to treat Naruto in a way that he would become submissive. Sarutobi had hoped that in the future when Naruto was a shinobi, he would be completely submissive to the ones in power. It would also prevent Naruto from lashing out when he was beaten or abused. It was the only reason Sakura had managed to beat Naruto on a daily basis and not get beaten to a bloody pulp. Sarutobi looked at Minato with pleading eyes. Minato, you must understand, if Naruto grew resentful of this village he would have lashed out, possibly destroyed us with Kyuubi's power. I could not allow that. Minato grabbed Sarutobi by the throat. And you would allow my son to be abused and tortured like a common criminal. He let go of Sarutobi's throat and pulled out another document. Oh, I am sure the Hyuga clan would love to see this document. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Minato threw the document to the floor in front of Hiruzen. It was the actual treaty signed between himself and the Raikage. The treaty presented to Konoha was little more than a clever implication of words that convinced the council. The real treaty was essentially treachery. The treaty said, I Hiruzen Sarutobi, Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, agree to the terms of which Kumo demands for an immediate truce between our two nations. In return for the immediate withdrawal of all Kumogakure troops from Hai no Kuni, and the immediate removal of all outposts. I Hiruzen Sarutobi agree to the following terms. Kumogakure will be granted 30% of our treasury, along with any Raiden Jutsu rank B or higher, including those from the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing. This includes the Hatake family collection of Raiden Jutsu. Since Kakashi Hatake does not know of them, we need not worry about him questioning into its absence. Konohagakure will release all prisoners of war, and will be pardoned of their crimes against Konohagakure no Sato. Konoha will also hand over any of Kumogakure's missing nin, regardless of any services they have performed for Konoha. And finally, Konohagakure will hand over one main branch Byakugan user. Konoha will assure that Kumo is capable of capturing a user of the Byakugan without Anbu interference. All Anbu will be focused on guarding the Kumo entourage while your ambassador locates and kidnaps a main branch Hyuga. The rest of the document was details on the Hyuga compound and locations of Hyuga patrols, slipped to him by a member of the Elder Council who died 3 days after the incident with Kumo. Sarutobi yelled, Kumo outnumbered us 3-1, if I did not agree to their demands they would have invaded us and destroyed us all. Giving them the Byakugan quelled most of their hostilities. Minato backhanded Sarutobi. You nearly caused a fourth great shinobi war, you dropped our economy, you gave away jutsu that were not yours to give, and you would have condemned Hinata Hyuga to a life as a baby factory. Minato pulled out several documents, and then he glared at the Sandaime. This one is absolutely appalling. He slammed the document into the ground in front of Sarutobi. It was the assassination order of every last Uchiha, leaving only Sasuke Uchiha alive. You committed a genocide of the Uchiha clan, ordering our top Anbu to slaughter them, including the women and children, and you only allowed him to keep Itachi alive, and by the looks of it, you needed to place a suggestive genjutsu on him to make him do it, because he refused to infants. The Uchiha clan was planning to rebel. Minato grabbed Hiruzen by the scruff of his neck. And where was your proof? Some side conversations by mentally unstable Uchiha who had been so mentally scarred from battles in the war that they went crazy, that proof. He threw Sarutobi to the ground. You know as well as I do some shinobi never recover from missions, most Uchiha never do, and end up speaking nonsense about this and that. Minato looked through the documents, and stopped at the most recent one, his eyes widening with fury. You worthless piece of shit. Minato kicked Sarutobi directly in the face. This is all the evidence I need, Sarutobi, you will be lucky to live. Minato turned to Inoichi. Find what you can from him, but keep him alive long enough so I can watch the life drain from his eyes. Minato walked towards the door. As it opened he walked out, being followed by his wife. Inoichi performed hand seals as H glared at the Sandaime. Shintenshin no Jutsu. Sarutobi's eyes widened as Inoichi used his mind transfer jutsu to literally tear through his mental defenses, and began to walk through high mind. Sarutobi's mindscape. Inoichi suddenly appeared in front of a hallway. The inside of Sarutobi's mind looked like the inside of the Hokage Tower. Inoichi stood and looked around, and he found there were several hallways. At the front of one was memories. He walked down that hallway and looked at how it was laid out. On each door there were names: Konohamaru, Kakashi, Asuma, Kaharu, Homura, Danzo. Inoichi looked at the door labeled Danzo and opened it. Memory. Inoichi's eyes opened as he looked around. He was in the Hokage's office. He looked around, and saw Sarutobi doing documents. He was about to get a closer look, when there was knocking at the door. Sarutobi looked up. Enter. The door opened to reveal Danzo walking in. He had a smile on his face as he walked towards the sandaime. What do you have to report, Danzo? Danzo sat down on the chair in front of the desk and spoke. I am pleased to say that Root is doing well. My lowest ranking soldiers are now on par with a low Chunin, and my highest ranking soldiers could rival Anbu Black Ops. Not bad for a bunch of 12-year-olds. Inoichi's eyes widened in fury. The sandaime had continued with the Root operations in secret, when the Yondaime had ordered Root be permanently disbanded, especially with the experiments they had been performing on orphans. Sarutobi nodded his head. Good, they will prove useful in the future. We may just be able to expand our ideals to other nations soon, and then we can put an end to war, and then we can truly have peace. No friction between ideals means no conflict, no pain, no war. Sarutobi went back to his documents. I expect a report in a week. Danzo nodded his head and walked towards the door. End memory. Inoichi barged right out the door that contained the conversation Sarutobi had with Danzo, and he screamed, Ah, you son of a bitch. He punched the walls, hoping he could cause of trauma to the old man. He began inhaling and exhaling, trying to calm himself down. Okay, getting worked up is not going to help me out here. Alright, who is next? He continued walking down the hallways. He found doors for every shinobi he has ever had any contact with, and then he stopped in front of a door. It was partially cracked, but why? He took a closer look at it, trying to find its name. His eyes widened when he saw whose door it was, Orochimaru. With Naruto. Naruto was taking a nap on the bow of the ship they were on. According to Kurenai-sensei, they would land in Yuki no Kuni in a few days. In that time he had learned an important lesson. He hates boats. On the entire trip he was on the side puking up what was in his stomach, and if that wasn't bad enough, he was the one who had to make sure Yukie did not escape from the ship on one of the life rafts. All in all, he regretted going on this mission, and they had not been on the boat for more than an hour. Naruto sighed, and then his eyes widened as he heard his stomach gurgle. Oh shit, not again. He jumped up and ran to the bow, HURAGH, and let out the crimson tuna from this morning. He fell to the ground clutching his stomach. Damn high-class fish, why can't they have something that I will be able to stomach? He pushed himself off the ground and walked to the ship's mast, looking at the fading mass of land behind them. He walked towards the door to the ship's brig, and went down to the brig. He walked past rows upon rows of wooden planks. Occasionally there would be a hook for lanterns, but Naruto had spent enough time in the dark growing up that the darkness of a ship was little more than a new environment with familiar settings. He walked into the holding bay and walked around, trying to find something that wasn't high-class food. He found some materials to make something simple, not that gourmet crap that tasted like it was prepared for kings. For some reason he could not stand dining like that. He grabbed a few slices of bread, some cheese, a few bits of meat, and a bit of some sauce. He was about to bite into his sandwich, when a crate fell over. He turned and looked at which crate had fallen. It was a crate stacked near the back edge of the crate underneath it, and the waves were not strong enough to knock it over, so that meant someone else was in here. Naruto pulled out a set of kunai and began to check around. If it was a bandit it would be no problem, but if it was a shinobi, things could get bad. Naruto checked the area the crate had fallen from. He found a light trace of footfalls here, meaning whoever was in here, either was not trying to mask their presence, or was too incompetent to hide it in the first place. Naruto followed the trace of footfalls, trying to see if there was a pattern. Most did not know, but when it came to tracking, as long as there were marks left, he was top-notch. He stopped when he saw the feet stop in front of a wall. So, either the person somehow got away, or, Naruto placed his hands in a release seal, Kai. A wave of chakra shot out of his body, and the wall in front of him became one of the last people he wanted to see. The person turned around and used his one-eye-to-eye smile. Oh, hey Naruto. Back with Inoichi. Inoichi swallowed hard. By the way the door was, the memory must not have been the best, but it would be more than enough to determine what the most recent memory of Orochimaru there was. No one knew how Orochimaru managed to get away, so this was the only lead they had at the moment. Inoichi slowly reached towards the door's handle, and opened it to the unknown. Memory. Inoichi opened his eyes to see Orochimaru and Sarutobi crossing weapons. The two fought for a few moments before Sarutobi pushed himself away from Orochimaru. He went through a set of hand seals. This is the end, Orochimaru. By the end of this day, you will never be able to use your jutsu again. Sarutobi launched forward as his hands ignited with fire. He grabbed Orochimaru's forearms and yelled, Kaden, Nensho Sohu. Orochimaru screamed in pain as his arms were burned, still attached to his body. Sarutobi let go of his arms as they began to wither into ashes. He desummoned Enma and pulled out a kunai. You will not escape this day, Orochimaru. Sarutobi ran at Orochimaru, aiming for his heart, but stopped at the words that came out of Orochimaru's mouth. And lose the chance to bring your beloved back to life. Hiruzen's eyes widened. What was he talking about? Inoichi was shocked, and he was praying that what he thought Sarutobi was doing was not true. Oh yes, Sarutobi-sensei, I can only use my perfect rebirth technique once every 5 months, but because I cannot speak to the Shinigami at the moment, and my next opening is in 6 months, it will be that much more difficult, but, if you let me live, I can guarantee that in 6 months, you can have your beloved wife. Sarutobi lowered his kunai, and began to ponder. Orochimaru sealed the deal. And of course, she will have all her free will, especially since it was you she cherished most. Sarutobi looked down. He had gone into a great depression since his wife's death, and he would sell his soul to the devil if it would bring her back, but he has been given a chance. Let Orochimaru live, and he gets his wife back. He thought of all the pain Orochimaru had caused, all of the hell he had brought forth, but his selfish desire to be with his wife was far too strong. Sarutobi looked at the 3 Anbu outside the barrier. I'm sorry, and used the special cage seal on their arms. They fell unconscious, and the last half an hour was permanently erased from their minds, a safety protocol to prevent information leakage should they ever be caught. Sarutobi turned to Orochimaru. All right, you may live, but please, bring me back my wife. Orochimaru got a malicious smirk as his bodyguards surrounded him. I promise, Sarutobi-sensei. The group disappeared in a shunshin as one of the hit Sarutobi in the back of the head, effectively knocking him out. End memory. Inoichi couldn't believe it. He could not believe it. Hiruzen Sarutobi had allowed Orochimaru escape, so he could bring his wife back to life. Inoichi turned towards the exit, not bothering to check out the rest of the doors, for he had enough evidence to condemn Sarutobi for something that had not been practiced in Konoha since the time of the Nadaime. Death by forced seppuku. Back with Naruto. Naruto looked at the man in front of him and snarled, "What are you doing here, Kakashi Hatake?" Kakashi looked at Naruto. Well, I thought perhaps I could, maybe, teach you a few things. Naruto snarled at Kakashi, releasing a trace amount of intent, enough to make Kakashi flinch suddenly. You had your chance to teach me, the entire time that you were my sensei. You got what you wanted. You can now train the Uchiha exclusively, so what reason would you have to train the no-talent Kyuubi brat? Kakashi flinched at the cold tone Naruto was addressing him with. Why other than to train my sensei's son? Naruto did not give Kakashi time to blink. He grabbed Kakashi by the collar and slammed him straight into the wall behind him. Kakashi was shocked at the strength Naruto showed, as well as the speed he executed his attack. I am tired of this bullshit. If the Yondaime sent you here to trick me so he can have me without me expecting you, then forget it, now. I will repeat myself for the last time, and listen very, very, closely. Kakashi tried to protest. I am Naruto Uzumaki, the bastard orphan that the Yondaime used to save the village of Konoha. I have no family, and I will forever remain alone. Naruto let go of Kakashi and walked back to the staircase to the upper deck. He grabbed his sandwich before he headed up the stairs, while Kakashi slumped to the floor, clutching the scroll he was about to give to Naruto. Back in Konoha, Minato busted open his office door. He had left Ibiki, Inoichi, and Anko there to get any and all information he needed out of the old man, but he smiled to himself. He now had undeniable proof that Naruto was his son. He reached to grab it off the desk, to find it wasn't there. Kushina came into the room to find Minato throwing documents everywhere. He had a panicked look on his face as he shuffled through the documents. Honey, what is wrong? Minato looked at Kushina, tears starting to flow down his face. The birth certificate, it's gone. Kushina went wide-eyed and began to rummage through the documents as well. She was about to go through a folder, when she saw a piece of paper under the heater. Her eyes widened in terror. Oh God, please no. She ran to the piece of paper. Minato followed suit. They quickly pulled it out. It was Naruto's birth certificate, all right. But the birth certificate was in terrible condition. The wax ink used to write out the forms had melted and smudged. It was impossible to read the names. The blood used as indicators was blackened, impossible to trace. The DNA in it was probably destroyed. The two fell to the floor. The only piece of evidence to prove that Naruto was their son, the only object that would allow them to become a family again, was destroyed. Minato fell to the floor sobbing while Kushina was whimpering like a dog, muttering things like, "It's all my fault." She fell to the floor crying as well. Minato clutched his eyes, but then they shot open. He remembered that he had made sure there were 2 copies of all his documents, marriage certificates, birth certificates, even academy curriculum files, and he had entrusted the copy of Naruto's birth certificate to one person, his best friends, Hiashi Hyuga. He slapped himself, wondering why he did not remember it before, but turned to his wife, Kushina. I just remembered, Hiashi has the extra copy of the birth certificate, come one. Kushina wasted no time and rather than taking the door she jumped out the window. Minato followed close behind. Kurenai massaged her temples as Naruto came into their quarters with Kakashi in tow. He explained that he had gone down to get a sandwich when he found Kakashi on the ship. Sighing to herself, she looked at her emotionally strained student. Is that all, Naruto? Naruto looked at Kurenai. Yes, that is all. Can I go now? Kurenai wanted to go nuts over his rude tone, but she calmed herself. Hell, if she was in his position she would have gone missing nin by now. Naruto walked out of the cabin and closed the door, and began to look around for a place he could relieve his stomach of his lunch. Meanwhile Kurenai turned to Kakashi, incredibly irritated with him. What are you doing here, Kakashi? You have caused enough problems for Naruto as it is, and I don't feel like dealing with you trying to stunt it any further. Kakashi cringed at the Ice Queen's harsh tone, but spoke up, with the most pitiful tone to ever come out of his mouth. I just wanted to train him, be a proper sensei. I mean, Kakashi was silenced by Kurenai, who released some ki. You had 6 months, Kakashi, to be a proper sensei. You had 6 months to follow your sensei's last wish. You had 6 months to fulfill the duty you swore on the moment you took the Jonin rank. Naruto is my student, he is my responsibility. I will not let you destroy everything he has worked so hard for. Kurenai shoved him out of the way, but Kakashi stopped her, tears brimming at his eyes. Kurenai, I know I made a huge mistake. Hell, huge would be an understatement. But let's face it, your training methods are not the best source for Naruto's skills. He is a ninjutsu specialist, you and I both know that. Kurenai slowly turned towards Kakashi, narrowing her eyes. I may not know the skills that are best for his field, but I am a much better teacher than you will ever be. I mean, just look at you. She looked at Kakashi with the most disgusted look he had ever seen. You abandoned your precious Uchiha to come gallivant all the way out here to Yuki no Kuni so you could teach your sensei's son. Leaving your apprentice to train himself, and correct me if I am wrong, but it was the Yondaime's orders, that you stay away from him, and train your student, and if I remember what the penalties were, the moment you step through Konoha's gates, your Sharingan will be torn from its socket, your chakra will be sealed, and you will be locked up in a cage for the rest of your life, with nothing but a bucket to shit in. Kurenai turned away from Kakashi and smirked. Essentially, you have just ended your shinobi career, for a genin that will never want you. She exited the cabin and headed towards the main part of the ship. Kakashi meanwhile fell to the floor in tears. Kurenai was right, all of this was his fault, every last bit of it. And now because he was too damn persistent, he has just ended his shinobi career. Kakashi gained a look of determination in his eyes. If my shinobi career is going to end, then at the very least I am going to teach Naruto something, but Kakashi slumped back down. The only way he would be able to teach Naruto anything, would be if he could somehow trick him into doing it, and in the last month, Naruto has become far more aware. Kakashi thought about every jutsu he knew. There was not a single jutsu he knew that he could teach Naruto, not without it being obvious. Kakashi's eyes widened in realization, a smirk gracing his lips. There was one jutsu in his arsenal that he could teach Naruto, and he could do it without alerting Naruto to the fact he was teaching him, his sensei's prized jutsu, and Naruto's birthright. The Rasengan. Back in Konoha, Hyuga compound. Minato and Kushina had practically teleported to the Hyuga compound. They ran to the clan's main office and slammed it open, to find Hiashi massaging his head with a bag of ice. Apparently they were looking for the same document. Minato was thrilled that his old friend had kept the document. He was not so thrilled with the progress. What do you mean you can't find the document? Hiashi cringed at Minato's yell. It was not surprising, especially since Minato had found the one hope he had left of convincing his son he was his true father. I am sorry Minato, but when we were told Naruto was dead by Hiruzen, we forgot about the document as it was too painful of a reminder of you. We had already coated it in a special chakra seal so as to prevent the document from ever being destroyed in simple fires. So we could not destroy it, especially since the one who placed the veil on it was when the nine-tailed fox attacked us. Kushina looked at Ishii. Hiashi, I am going to be very frank with you. Hiashi immediately paled. How is it that the clan with 360 feet of vision, and can see through walls, can't find one single piece of paper? Kushina grabbed Hiashi by his shirt and started shaking him like a rag doll. Hiashi began saying in between each shake, I have been trying to locate it for the last month. Will you please stop it? Kushina stopped using Hiashi as a rag doll. He brushed himself off and sighed as he scratched the back of his neck. As I said, for the past month we have looked over every last inch of the compound. We have used out Byakugan to find the document. Kushina got a thoughtful expression on her face. Have you checked this office? Comma. Hiashi slapped himself in the face. I am an idiot, a big fat white-eyed idiot. He went through hand seals, Byakugan. He looked through his office, and found that there were 3 hidden compartments layered with chakra-restrictive metal. I forgot about those. He turned off his Byakugan and looked at Kushina and Minato. I found 3 safes, if I remember. All 3 have the same combination. December 27, 13. Kushina, there is one under my desk. Minato, the other is by my bookshelf. I will look in the one behind my wife's photo. The 3 got up and went to their respective safes. Minato located the one next to the bookshelf with a well-placed punch in the wall. He pulled out the safe and began to undo the locks. He placed in the code and opened the safe. He pulled out its contents to find a very old scroll, layered in dozens upon dozens of complex seals. Hiyashi went to the portrait of his wife and gently took it off before he tore apart the wall to grab the safe. He pulled it out and began to open it up. Kushina had just opened up the safe under Hiyashi's desk, and had the most shocked expression on her face. Hiyashi found that the documents inside the safe were not the birth certificates, but they were almost as good. His wife had apparently hidden the birth certificates somewhere safe. Judging by the riddle on the paper, it would take a long time to find the documents. To those who may find this, I have a few things to say. I was walking through the Hokage Tower when I found out that Naruto was in fact alive. I wanted to tell you, but I grew sick not long after, and all of you were away on an important meeting that I chose to stay behind for. I have not told anybody for fear of what the Sandaime will do. Before you all came home, I hid the birth documents in places that the Sandaime could never find them. The first document is hidden in the place closest to home, but farthest to the heart. Hiyashi sighed. His wife always liked riddles, and he could always figure them out. He sat back and thought, okay, so it is the place closest to home, but farthest from the heart. Hikari always had another meaning in important parts of the riddles she did. Okay, so home, she might have considered the garden her home, but, Hiyashi clasped his head, Aaghh, damn it, what was the place Hikari always considered home? Exclamation mark single quote. Hiyashi would have continued his thought process had Kushina not stood in front of him with a massive blush on her face. Kushina, what is it? Kushina handed Hiyashi the items she found in the safe. Hiyashi looked at them, and his eyes widened in horror. They were pictures of his and Hikari's honeymoon. She had insisted on placing cameras all around the room to commemorate such an occasion. The resulting photos were of him and Hikari in just about every UAL position one could think of. Minato burst out laughing at seeing his old teammate blushing worse than his daughter ever could. Damn Hiyashi, who knew you could be such a beast? He laughed as he indicated to the picture of Hiyashi and Hikari in A. Alright, enough, damn it. Now, let's see if we can figure out this damn riddle, and put my honeymoon photos away. Kushina smiled and put the photos away, but sealed a few copies into an unseen seal on her wrist for future blackmail. The 3 sat down and began to read through the riddle, trying to figure out what it meant. Kushina got a look of realization. Home, what about the branch house building? From what I remember, she always spent a lot of time there. Minato and Hiyashi nodded their heads. Seems like a logical place to start, but what is the place farthest from the heart? The 3 sat and thought on this, before Hiyashi groaned, oh please, not her. Minato and Kushina were confused as to who her was. Hiyashi, however, was groaning at the fact he would have to ask for the assistance of Hikari's twin sister. Naruto. Naruto was hurling over the side of the ship, not enjoying even the smallest amount of time being on the ship. He got back up and groaned as he clutched his stomach. Kami-sama, damn it, this is going to be a long ride. Hinata was watching Naruto, all the while thinking, should I tell him now? There are no girls around for him to reject before I confess, so I can't lose my confidence, but what if he still rejects me? What if he does not care for me? Hinata clutched her chest as the prospect of rejection set in. No, I can't tell him, not now. Hinata walked off and sat near the rails. Time skipped 3 days later. Naruto was gritting his teeth in annoyance. Their client had to be the most spoiled, self-centered bitch on the seas, because in the last 10 minutes she had rejected foods that were fit for daimyos. Her manager tried pleading with her. Please Yukie, if you don't eat you will get sick, we can't afford to have you weary on this trip. Yukie glared at Sandayu. For the last time, I refuse to eat this slop and garbage, this stuff isn't fit for dogs. Naruto had enough. Oh, for the love of shit, will you just eat? There are hundreds of thousands of people in the world that would give away their right arm for a decent meal. Naruto looked at her, and if this stuff isn't fit for a dog, then I must be far below a dog, because I would eat shit out of garbage cans if I couldn't afford ramen for the first 8 years of my life. Naruto got up and stormed out of the mess hall, not wanting to deal with the spoiled actress. Yukie looked at Naruto. What is he talking about? She got up and was about to follow him. Wait. She turned to see Hinata stand up. I will go check up on him. Hinata walked out of the room while Yukie looked at Kurenai. What is his problem? Kurenai sighed as she stroked her temples. Honestly, nowadays I wonder what isn't his problem. She walked out of the room, carrying her dango. Yukumo sighed. She had hoped that Naruto would eventually lighten up, but by the looks of things, that wasn't likely to happen. On deck, Naruto was looking over the sea. He had finally gotten over his accursed seasickness. Granted, it took him barfing up his breakfast, lunch, dinner, and just about every last snack that entered his stomach. Naruto fished in his pocket and pulled out a scroll. It was a technique he had been trying to figure out for weeks, and he knew, at least to his twisted view, that nobody would favor anyone without noble blood, or even teach him something in the first place, so he was on his own there. Anyo. Naruto turned to see Hinata standing next to the railing. Is there anything I can do to help you? Naruto quirked an eyebrow, before he sighed. Hinata, there is nothing you can do to help me. He began to roll up the scroll. Hinata stopped him. Naruto-kun, I saw you reading the scroll. I may have only been partially taught in the Hyuga arts, but I know that the scroll you were holding was very similar to Jiyuken in fighting, so, I thought, maybe. Naruto stopped her. Hinata, don't waste your time, you have so much promise as a kunoichi, and you would be wasting your time using your talent to help a bastard orphan like me. No, I wouldn't. Naruto turned to Hinata, who was quivering, but holding her stance. Naruto-kun, I would not be helping a bastard orphan. Naruto started to get angry. He was about to snap at Hinata for bringing up the charade of the Yondaime. I would be helping my friend and the person I admire. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Hinata, if this is some trick you thought up. Naruto let the thread hang in the air and looked directly into Hinata's eyes, like he had done every girl that has said similar things. Hinata swallowed the lump in her throat. Why, you were my inspiration. You gave me the courage to stand up for myself. You gave me the courage to do what others said I could not. Hinata swallowed as her eyes brimmed with tears. You were the one to give me confidence, when I was only filled with doubt. Hinata closed her eyes and awaited the insults, the yelling, the hate, but she did not expect the hand on her shoulder. Snapping her eyes open, she saw the kind smile of Naruto. Hinata, I believe you. Naruto gave her a gentle friendly hug, making the Hyuga heiress blush up a storm. Naruto-kun is hugging me. Naruto stepped back. Hinata, unlike all those other girls, you had no hint of deception in your eyes. I am grateful that at least one person does not fall for the Yondaime's charade. Naruto smiled as he unfurled the scroll. Hinata was cringing on the inside. Naruto-kun, the Yondaime is your father. She sighed to herself, but, if it keeps you happy, I will ignore that fact. She sat beside Naruto and began to instruct him through the scroll of one of the oldest forms of taijutsu. Chakra Kuchiku, Chakra Destruction. 2 days later, Naruto was standing at the counter of the ship's kitchen, trying to properly stir the ingredients in the bowl. He was growing frustrated. For some reason he just could not stir the ingredients properly. He was about to throw the bowl out the ship's window. Hey Naruto, he turned around to see Hinata standing in front of him. Anyo, how about I show you a way to properly stir the ingredients with your chakra? She stood in front of the counter and began to focus chakra in the palm of her hand. It began to swirl as her eyes focused on the palm of her hand. Naruto followed the instructions, and eventually he too was able to do the same thing. Hinata smiled as she placed her hand, palm towards the ingredients and began to sue her chakra to spin it. Naruto followed the instructions, and the ingredients were perfectly stirring themselves. Naruto smiled as he turned towards his friend. Thanks Hinata-chan, you are the greatest. Hinata blushed as she smiled and left the kitchen. While Naruto continued to mix the ingredients, Hinata walked to her cabin. Once she was inside, she performed a hand seal and spoke. Kai, a puff of smoke later, and in place of Hinata, was Kakashi Hatake. Kakashi sighed as he went to his bunk at the end of the hall. I am sorry for deceiving you Naruto, but you would never accept help from me, and I have no intention of letting this plan go to waste. Kakashi walked down the hall, unaware of the events he had just brought about. 2 days later, Naruto was sitting on top of the deck, all the while practicing the stirring technique that Hinata taught him. He began to think to himself, with enough power and control, this could turn into quite an awesome jutsu. I want to ask Hinata for help, but maybe I should surprise her first. He continued to practice the technique. Crash, but he toppled over as he felt the ship crash into something. He looked over the edge and was shocked. They had somehow hit an iceberg, but how the hell did they hit an iceberg when they should have seen it coming miles away, especially one that was big enough to hold a hidden village and a couple acres of land to boot? They all unloaded from the ship, the director feeling it would be the perfect spot for the next scene in the Princess Gale series. Naruto was groaning in annoyance. They had no idea how far the damn iceberg would drift, so staying here would be a very bad idea. Naruto was about to voice his concerns. Well, hello there. Naruto turned his head, and saw 3 Yuki shinobi wearing a strange type of armor. There was a skinny man with slightly long light bluish hair, a woman with short pink hair, and a large bulky man with black hair. The bluish-haired man snickered. My, so, you have returned, Kakashi Hatake. Kakashi snarled as he looked at the man, Nadare Roga. Kakashi pulled out a kunai and ran at the Yuki ninja. The other 2 charged at the group. Naruto quickly performed Kage Bunshin and attacked. Yakumo began to use genjutsu when she lost sight of them because of snow blast. She could not see her opponents. Kurenai was having the same problem. Hinata charged through the snow and yelled, Shugohaku Rokujuin Sho. Hinata used her natural flexibility and began to fire off needles. She managed to fire a good amount at the pink-haired woman, but was shocked when they were deflected. The woman smirked. Ooh, is the big bad Hyuga shocked her attack didn't work? She got a psychotic grin. Well, get used to it, cause none of them are getting through. Hinata closed her eyes waiting for the strike. Back off. She opened her eyes to see Naruto standing in front of her, with a sphere of chakra in her hands. Her eyes widened. She knew the technique. She had studied it for pointers on her Jiyuken. She whispered in her mind, the Rasengan. Kurenai and Yakumo saw the swirling chakra. How? Kakashi smiled. He has almost completed it. Naruto threw the swirling ball of chakra to the woman. Eat this. He slammed it into her abdomen. She was thrown back and coughed up a bit of blood. She looked down at where he hit and was shocked. How? He broke through the chakra armor. Impossible. Nadare saw the technique and then looked at the blonde. He smirked. So, it is true. He performed a single hand seal, disappearing in a swirl of snow and ice. Naruto was about to charge and attack the pink-haired girl again, when his arm was grabbed by Nader and he was thrown back at the group, crashing into a small pillar of ice. Nader smirked. So, the son of the Yondaime graces us. Naruto looked at the man with absolute hatred. He began to charge up another one of the swirling strikes, and using his father's prized jutsu too. Naruto stopped mid-step, glaring at him. What the hell are you talking about? Nader chuckled and pointed at the incomplete Rasengan. What you are holding in your hands is the Rasengan. A purely chakra-based close-range strike, strong enough to break through any armor. Even our chakra armor is incapable of blocking it. He jumped backwards, but, by the looks of it, your Rasengan is incomplete, so, it's all the better. Nader held up his arm and fired off 3 ice kunai that tore through the air. Naruto moved out of the way, and snapped his head towards Hinata, hurt evident in his eyes. Hinata, why did you lie to me? Hinata saw the look. Why is he looking at me like that? The two were not able to think any further as they suddenly had to move out of the way of 2 black dragons. They looked up and saw a man wearing daimyo-like effects. Yukie began to shiver as she looked at the man. The man smiled as he looked at her. Koyuki Kazuhana, you look so lovely. Koyuki turned and ran towards the ship, but the man suddenly appeared in front of her, grabbing her by the throat. Oh my, still a runner, no different than your father. The man reaches for her. Hey, he turns his head as Yakumo curls up a fist, take this. And punches him square in the nose. He lets go of Yuki, who Kurenai grabs and runs back towards the ship. The rest of the group quickly follows with Kakashi turning back and yelling, Hyoten, Akaku Hakuge. The ice around them cracks as a massive white leviathan tears through the ice, providing a screen for the ship's escape. The man, Dodo Kazuhana, snarls in anger. Damn, I almost had it. He stands and watches as they leave, knowing their next destination. Yuki no Kuni. Back on the ship, Hinata is following Naruto trying to see if he is okay. Naruto-kun, what happened, are you alright? She reached out to grab his shoulder, but he slapped it away. He looked at her with hurt on his face. I can't believe you lied to me, Hinata. Can't believe you had to trick me into learning the Yondaime's technique. Hinata was severely confused. Naruto-kun, what are you talking about? Naruto lets a few tears fall from his eyes as he snaps at her. 2 days ago you came into the kitchen and taught me this so-called technique for stirring food. I trusted you so I did not question it. You abused my trust, how could you? Naruto ran past her and slammed the door behind him. Hinata was too shocked to move. Before anyone could do anything, she fell to the floor in tears. No, I didn't do it. Why don't you believe me? Kurenai scooped Hinata in her arms. Hinata, what happened? Hinata sobbed as she spoke. Naruto-kun said that I taught him the Rasengan, that I abused his trust, but I have never even taught Naruto anything. I only guided him through the scrolls he brought, that's it. Hinata sobbed into Kurenai's chest. Kurenai was confused. How could Naruto have? Oh no, her eyes gained a cold hard expression. That bastard. She let go of Hinata and walked towards the room of the only other Jonin on the ship. Kakashi Hatake. Kakashi was smiling to himself. He had finally managed to teach Naruto something, and if he remembered correctly from Naruto's profile, Naruto will seek ways to make his attack stronger. Eventually that could lead him to nature manipulation. In a matter of months, Kakashi felt he would succeed in making Naruto excel past his father. He smiled to himself as he thought, using Hinata's form was perfect, he would never have suspected her. Luckily Naruto won't get angry at her for this, so it isn't a problem. Now, how am I going to get a slip with the copy of the Hiraishin seal to Naruto? He began to think of possible ways he could accomplish this, when his door was kicked down by Kurenai. He was not able to move before the Genjutsu mistress grabbed Kakashi by his throat and slammed him into the wall. You bastard, how could you deceive Naruto like that? Kurenai slammed Kakashi's head into the headboard of the bed and threw him into the wall. Kakashi tried to get up but his fingers were crushed by Kurenai slamming the heel of her foot into it. He screamed out as Kurenai grabbed his hair and slammed him into the wall. Do you have any idea how much you hurt Naruto, how much you hurt Hinata? Kakashi was confused. What do you mean? How could Hinata have been hurt? Kurenai slapped Kakashi and kicked him in the stomach. You bastard! Naruto trusted Hinata, and you used her own form to betray him. Do you know what has happened? Exclamation mark quote. Kurenai began to beat the shit out of Kakashi as she spoke. He felt betrayed. He thought she had abused his trust. Now thanks to you, his trust may very well have been destroyed for good. Kurenai kicked him one last time for good measure. When we get back to Konoha, you will be lucky to get a cell, and not the execution bar. You have disobeyed the Hokage's orders, and you have impersonated a fellow shinobi. 2 sets of treason, more than enough for imprisonment, and just enough for execution. She kicked Kakashi in the face and stormed out of the cabin. Kakashi meanwhile wept. He had failed again, and this time, he had no chance to fix this failure. Naruto sat on his bed, scowling at the sea through his porthole. How could Hinata do such a thing, especially after I trusted her? Naruto slammed his fist into the headboard as he snarled. Can I never have peace? Is my entire life just one big manipulation? Can I never choose my own path? Naruto continued to look out at the sea. Naruto. The doors were slammed open as Kurenai came in. Naruto looked at Kurenai. Yes, Kurenai-sensei, what is it? Kurenai walked over to Naruto and grabbed his shoulders. Naruto, it's about Hinata. She didn't. Naruto shoved Kurenai off him with a snarl as he made a move towards the door. She is the last person I want to talk about at this moment, and I would greatly appreciate it if you did not mention her. Kurenai grabbed Naruto's shoulders and forced him to look at her. Naruto, Hinata didn't teach any part of the Rasengan. It was. Naruto pushed Kurenai off him and made a grab for the door handle. I said I don't want to talk about her, Kurenai. Naruto grabbed the door handle and began to turn it, when he suddenly began to feel drowsy. He let go of the door handle as he fell backwards onto his. Naruto opened his eyes to see Kurenai sternly looking at him. If you won't believe words, then maybe you will believe your eyes. Kurenai charged chakra into her index finger and poked Naruto's forehead. Naruto's eyes widened as the memories of what had transpired in the last half an hour showed themselves. Kakashi's deceit, Hinata's tears. Kurenai removed her fingers from Naruto's forehead and looked at the blonde, who laid there processing everything he had just seen. Kurenai's eyes slightly widened as he saw tears brim at his eyes. Kami, what have I done? Naruto quickly got up and ran to grab the door. Naruto, where are you going? Naruto turned towards Kurenai and answered. To make up for my stupid mistake. Naruto almost tore the door off its hinges as he ran down the hall towards Hinata's room. Naruto ran down the hallway and skidded to a halt in front of Hinata's doorway. Not thinking of anything else, he banged his fist on the door. Hinata, are you in there? Naruto waited for an answer. The door lightly cracked open, revealing the bloodshot eyes of Hinata Hyuga. Anyo. What is it? Naruto K-kun. Hinata expected Naruto to berate her more, scorn her even, but she did not expect what Naruto did. He fell to his knees and bowed as he began to apologize. Hinata, I am so sorry, I shouldn't have jumped to such a conclusion. Naruto lightly looked up. I mean honestly, how could you possibly know the Yondaimi's signature jutsu, especially when all of his techniques are secret? Naruto bowed lower as he practically begged, "Please Hinata, I beg you, give me a chance to redeem myself, I will do anything." Hinata slid the door open a little wider as she looked at Naruto. "Anything?" Naruto sat up and quickly nodded his head. "Yes, anything at all." Naruto looked at Hinata, waiting for her to say something. "Give me a massage. Comma, comma, comma." Naruto stared at Hinata. Huh. Hinata looked at Naruto and repeated. "A massage? I would like a massage." Naruto could practically feel her smirking behind the door. Naruto sighed as he lightly chuckled to himself before he looked at her. "You are going to milk this for what it's worthy, aren't you?" Hinata smiled as a light smirk came to her lips. "Yes," she said with a very cat-like grin coming to her features. Naruto stood up as Hinata opened the door, and a massive blush came to his features. Hinata was standing in the doorway, wearing nothing except a towel by the looks of it, an equally large blush on her own features. Naruto swallowed as he entered her room as she laid herself out on her bed, spreading the back of the towel just enough so that she could show her back. Laying on her front, she looked at Naruto with a huge blush on her face. "Anyo, my shoulders are sore from the fight, could you soothe them, Naruto-kun?" Naruto took in a deep breath and let it out. "Don't think perverted thoughts. Don't think perverted thoughts. Don't think perverted thoughts." Naruto walked over and proceeded to gently rub Hinata's shoulders, eliciting satisfied groans from the young heiress. Hinata groaned as she adjusted herself. Naruto-kun, that feels so good." Naruto smiled as he continued to massage Hinata's back, all the while thinking. "Kakashi, I am going to ing you." Next day, Naruto was sighed as he stood on the deck of the ship. After he finished massaging Hinata the day before, he began to plot his revenge on Kakashi. No way in hell he was going to let the Cyclops go free, not after this. Naruto snapped his head in the direction of Kakashi's room as he heard the door crack open and Kakashi walked out, reading his orange book. Naruto snarled as he readied the first stage of his plan of revenge. Naruto pulled out a large piece of paper and looked it over. It showed a map of the entire ship, and all the traps he set up for the Jonin. Naruto grinned as Kakashi turned the corner, right into his first trap. Kakashi set his foot down, expecting there to be hardwood floor. Only for the floor to collapse beneath him as he dove into the brig, landing in a pile of garbage. The Cyclops was about to get up, when he heard a hissing sound right next to him. He looked down to his right to find an explosive tag. "Oh shit." Boom, Kakashi and the garbage were blown towards the back of the brig as a large chute opened up. The garbage and Kakashi flew through the chute and were sent right out of the ship. Kakashi tried to keep himself from going overboard, but fell towards the water. Kakashi grabbed for the ship, and managed to grab a ledge before he flew in. Kakashi watched as the garbage went down. Luckily he had managed to pocket his Ika Ika Paradise novel before they went through the chute. "Man, what is going on here?" "Hello Kakashi Tem, enjoying the view?" Kakashi looked up to find Naruto standing on the ledge. "I hope so, cause you aren't getting back up here for at least a day." Kakashi looked at Naruto. "What do you mean? I can just use chakra to walk up." Kakashi attempted to do so, only to find that his chakra would not circulate to his feet. Naruto chuckled as he saw Kakashi's panicked expression. That explosive note was more than just an explosive note, it is also a chakra-suppressing gas. When it went off, your chakra system essentially was put on vacation until the effects wear off, which should be in about, Naruto looked at a watch on his wrist, a day, maybe 2, perhaps 3. "I never got around to testing this before I became a genin, nor anytime after, so, I am not quite sure myself. All I know is that since it was based off a similar chemical that also lasts a day, it should be at least 24 hours. Kakashi glared at Naruto as he chuckled. Oh, don't worry, Kakashi. Naruto pulled up a suitcase, Kakashi's suitcase to be exact. I have something I can certainly entertain you with. Kakashi's eyes widened as Naruto pulled out a set of matches, vegetable oil, and opened his suitcase. No, you wouldn't. Naruto grinned as he held up one of the contents of the suitcase. Oh, but I would. In Naruto's hand was the limited edition editor's cut of the first issue of the Ica Ica Paradise, signed by the author. Only 200 exist. Naruto proceeded to cover the book in vegetable oil, which burned slowly, and then lit the match underneath the book, setting it on fire. No! Kakashi screamed as he watched the agonizingly slow process of burning his beloved books. Naruto grinned. In about 5 minutes, it will be one down. Naruto looked at the suitcase, which was filled to the brim with the series, and only 199 issues to go. No. A-A-A-A-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. The sea's usual silence was broken by the mortified screams of an obsessed pervert. Konoha. Hiashi groaned as he knocked on the door of Hikari Hyuga's twin sister, Hitomi Hyuga. As soon as he knocked on the door, it was slammed open and Hiashi was pulled right in between an impressive set of S by an incredibly beautiful woman. Oh, Hiashi-kun, I knew you would come. Now, she started dragging him in. First, we are going to use a few new toys I got. Before the woman could drag Hiashi in, she noticed Minato and Kushina standing there. Minato, Kushina. She let go of Hiashi and grabbed the two in a bear hug. I missed you two so much. So, might I ask why the two of you are here? Kushina gasped for breath as she pried herself out of the woman's grip. Hello, Hitomi. We are here for. Kushina narrowed her eyes as she saw Hitomi still crushing Minato's head between her, who was flailing his arms around as if his life depended on it. Hitomi, please let go of my husband, she said with a noticeable tick mark on her head. Hitomi looked at Kushina, then at Minato. Oh, and let him go. Minato stood up and began to gasp for breath as if it was the last gulp he would ever take. Sorry. Now, Hitomi leaned towards Kushina. Why are you here? Minato stood up. It would be better if we talked inside, if that isn't an issue. Hitomi shook it off and smiled. Of course it isn't, please. Come in. She grabbed Hiashi and dragged him towards the living room, propping him on the couch before she placed herself right next to him, while Minato and Kushina sat across from them. Now, what might I ask is the issue? Minato sighed. Hitomi, your sister before she died, found out that Naruto was alive. She hid the official documents that Hiashi had kept for all these years, and we expect one of the documents might be here. Hitomi nodded and grabbed her chin. I might remember something. Hitomi looked at Hiashi. If only somebody could jog my memory. Hiashi glared at his sister-in-law and spoke sternly. Look, Hitomi, we need to find those documents, and soon. We don't have time for your weird fetishes. Hitomi sighed and got up. Fine, hold on. Hikari brought over a scroll before she died. She said to never open it until you came to retrieve it. Hikari opened a drawer and began to pull stuff out of it. Minato, Kushina, and Hiashi ended up having to dodge everything from chains, whips, ropes and, was that a pack of condoms? They kept dodging until, found it. They watched as Hitomi walked towards them with a scroll. She seemed quite protective of this, so I am guessing this is what you are looking for. Minato nodded. Yes, thank you very. He reached to grab it, only for Hitomi to pull it away. Oh no, I have held onto this for many years, and I just seem so attached to it. She began to cradle the scroll like one would a baby. Yes I have. Kushina growled. Come on Hitomi, this is no time for games, we really need that scroll. Hitomi looked at Kushina and grinned. Well, I might be willing to give this to you. If, Hitomi looked at Hiyashi with a hungry grin. Minato and Kushina looked at Hiyashi, and realized what Hitomi wanted. Oh boy. Hiyashi saw the three of them looking at him and panicked. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There is no way in hell I am doing that, I refuse. Hiyashi crossed his arms and looked at everybody sternly. Kushina looked at Hiyashi. Yes, you are. Hiyashi looked at Kushina, and just what are you going to do if I don't? Kushina reached into her pocket and pulled out several pictures, making Hiyashi's eyes go wide. I am going to spread these pictures all over Konoha, is that what you want? In Kushina's hands were the more lecherous copies of him and Hikari's honeymoon. Hiyashi looked at Kushina. You wouldn't dare. Kushina got her hands in a shunshin and looked at Hiyashi. Try me. The look in Kushina's eyes left no room for argument. Kushina would do it, no doubt about it. Hiyashi glared holes at the ground as he ground out, fine, I'll do it. Hitomi smiled as she passed the scroll to Kushina. Excellent, now Hiyashi-kun, she spoke seductively into his ear. I expect you to be here no later than 5:30 tonight, no excuses. Hitomi got up and began to skip out of the room, humming a tune to herself. Hiyashi looked at Minato and Kushina. I can't even begin to tell you how much I hate you at this moment, I really can't. Minato opened the scroll. Shut up Hiyashi, you'll enjoy it later. Now, time to see what we have here. Minato looked at the scroll and found two separate documents. One was Naruto's genetic detail, and all other physical characteristics, along with his date of birth. It was one of 4 documents. The other one was another letter that had some sort of intricate riddle. Kushina grabbed the riddle and handed it to Hiyashi. Read and translate, now. Hiyashi grumbled as he took the sheet, looking at the riddle placed by his wife. Dear reader, if you have found this, then you figured out the first riddle. Now for the next riddle. The second document is hidden in the sight of the sinner. Hiyashi looked at the document. Okay, this is a tricky one. Kushina grabbed the paper and read the riddle. In the sight of the sinner, won't that be somebody who has a criminal track record? Hiyashi shook his head as he grabbed his forehead. No, Hitomi had those people placed in a different category. Her idea of a sinner was completely different. But what was it she defined as a sinner? Ishii sighed as he sat back in his chair. This one is going to take a little longer than the one we just did. Kushina and Minato sighed. Great, well, the two got up and turned to leave. We better get going, maybe we can figure it out while we wait for you. The two left the house, leaving Hiyashi in the living room. Yes, maybe you will. Hiyashi began to close his eyes. Before they shot open, those bastards left me here. Hiyashi was about to run to the door to flee. Oh Hiyashi-kun, a shiver ran up the Hyuga head's spine as he slowly turned around, finding Hitomi standing in front of him with her hair let down, a pair of panties, and a bathrobe, the only thing showing any decency for her. I am glad they left, now we can start early. Hitomi began to remove the bathrobe as she pulled out a set of handcuffs. Ah, back with Naruto. Naruto grinned as he burned one of Kakashi's favorite books, the extremely rare manga edition of Ika Ika Paradise, all the pictures and dialogue put into manga format. Kakashi was crying. Oh come on Naruto, what did I ever do wrong to you? Comma. Naruto's eyes lit up in absolute rage. What did you do? What did you do? Naruto jumped off the ledge and landed on Kakashi's fingers, making the Jonin cry out in pain. You took Hinata's form and made me learn the technique of the Yondaime. You almost destroyed my trust in her. That is what you did wrong, you bastard. Naruto jumped back up and used his chakra to walk up the side of the ship before he covered all of the other books in vegetable oil. Say goodbye to your precious collection. Naruto lit the books on fire and threw them overboard, permanently destroying them. No, Kakashi watched as the books flew through the air, burning as they fell into the ocean. completely ruining them as they floated off. Naruto sneered at Kakashi as he saw the Jonin sobbing at the loss of his precious collection, which he had spent the last 15 years working on. Remember this, Kakashi, before you make a stupid mistake like that again. Naruto walked off, leaving the Jonin still clinging to the edge. Next day, Naruto looked at the incoming land mass as he sat on the edge of the ship's railing. So, that's Yuki no Kuni. Quite different from Konoha, though. It's called Yuki no Kuni for a reason, ain't it? The entire country was covered in a massive expanse of snow. The only greenery was the massive amount of pine trees. As the ship was being unloaded, Yukie, or Koyuki as she was now known, was looking around, any possible route to escape. She finally found one and charged through the trees. Naruto saw her run and sighed, "Damn bitch, can't she just stop running?" Naruto used Shunshin and quickly went after her. Koyuki was about to slide down a hill when she tripped and fell through the snow, rolling down the hill instead of sliding like she intended. She slammed into several trees on the way down before she landed front first into a sheet of ice. Spitting out some blood from her mouth, she got up and was about to run, going somewhere. She turned around and saw Naruto standing behind her. "Come on, I don't feel like hauling you back. And I have every intention of getting paid for this mission." Koyuki grabbed a stick and swung it at Naruto, who simply caught it and snapped it in half. Koyuki looked at Naruto as he threw the stick to the side. "I am a shinobi for a reason, Koyuki Hime, so a stick isn't exactly going to help you on this one." Koyuki stepped back. "I am never going back, do you hear me? I will not go back." Sighing, Naruto pulled out a roll of ninja wire and was about to tie her up. "None of you are going anywhere." Naruto and Koyuki looked up to see Dodo Kazuhana before they felt a sharp pain at the back of their necks, and all they knew was darkness. "No, I know, I am using the Naruto gets knocked out cliffhanger cliché, but hey, I needed some way to end the chapter, this way just worked. Also, for those of you who figured out what Hitomi is going to do to Hiyashi, you deserve a pat on the back and a piece of cake, for those of you that didn't. No cake for you." Yes, Hinata sort of took advantage of Naruto's pleading, but you know what, Hinata needs to do that more often. I mean, I have seen several stories where Naruto hurts Hinata and she automatically forgives him after an apology. No. She need to milk the situation badly. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he finally awoke. He blinked a few times, as his eyesight was still blurry. When his vision finally cleared, he saw he was in a dark room with iron bars. He snapped his head around and saw that he was in a cell. He went to move his arms, to find that he couldn't. He looked to find his arms were bound and were laced with chakra-suppressing seals. Shit, that. He looked around, hoping he could find something he could break the damn chains with, or at least get those chakra-suppressing seals off. "You're wasting your time." Naruto snapped his head in the direction he heard the voice, to see Koyuki in a cell across from him. "It's better if you just give up." Naruto snorted as he finally found something he could use, a hairpin. He pulled himself up and began to try and pick the lock as he talked. "If I did that every time shit got tough, princess, I would have been dead a long time ago." Naruto heard a click as he continued trying to pick the lock. Snap, the hairpin broke inside the lock. Damn it. Naruto hoisted himself back down as he tried to think of a plan. "See, I told you, you are just going to die here, like the fool you are. You all should have left me to die and returned home. There is no spring here, only a never-ending cold where dreams. Would you shut the up?" Koyuki stopped as she looked at Naruto. "I am trying to concentrate here, you dumb bitch." Naruto grumbled about. "Stupid princess, who won't shut their mouths." He closed his eyes as he began to try and draw on his chakra. The chakra suppressors may be able to cut off chakra of Jonin level, but he knew for a fact that there was no way it was going to be able to cut off all of his chakra, which was beyond Jonin level. In fact, it was pretty damn close to cage level, so he should be able to draw on enough to use an escape jutsu. Naruto closed his eyes and tried to focus on the flow of his chakra, feel it as it passed through his coils. Drip. Naruto's eyes opened as he heard a dripping sound. Drip. He completely opened them and looked around. He was back inside his mindscape, so that meant. Naruto's smile crept up his lips as he realized what that meant. Perfect. He ran down the halls towards the Kyuubi's cage, and his best chance of escaping. Back with Team Kurenai, Yakumo leapt out of the way of an attack from Nadare Roga and quickly performed hand seals, Kurama Haijutsu, Narakumi no Jutsu. Nadare saw the technique coming and quickly leapt out of the way, letting one of the random Yuki shinobi get hit. The man screamed in pain and terror as he began to claw at his eyes before he fell bleeding to death from his sockets. Yakumo cursed as she leapt out of the way of Nadare's Hyoten techniques. Hinata sent a Jiyuken strike at Fubuki, who quickly grabbed her wrist and threw her in the air. Fubuki performed a set of hand seals, Hyoten, Sabama Fubuki, a hail of ice needles shot at Hinata in the shape of miniature swallows. Hinata quickly used Kaden in mid-air and allowed herself to fall towards Fubuki. She jumped out of the way as Hinata's Kaden created a crater where she landed. Hinata quickly jumped out of the ice crater and began to strike at Fubuki with brutal accuracy. Kurenai and Kakashi separated and tried to flank Mizore as he shot his retractable cable arm. He saw them coming and swung his cable arm at Kakashi as he used his other fist to block Kurenai's attack. Meanwhile, the movie crew was barely dodging the incoming kunai from the 50 or 60 Yuki nin loyal to Dodo. Sandeu pulled out a katana and sliced a Yuki nin's head diagonally in half as he blocked a strike from another one. Nadare chuckled as he threw Yakumo to the ground. You should just give up, we outnumber, and outclass you, little girl. Yakumo spat up some blood as she tried to sweep Nadare's legs out from under him. He jumped in the air and landed on a tree branch as Yakumo sneered, we'll see about that. She threw a kunai with an explosive note at Nadare as he began to perform hand seals. Hyoten. Roga Nadare no Jutsu. The falling ice around him transformed into a pack of wolves as they charged at Yakumo. Yakumo reached into her pouch and pulled out a string of explosive notes. I hope this works. She attached a kunai to each end and threw both kunai at the same time at two different trees, while keeping hold on one string as the wolves charged at her. The wolves leapt up and went to bite down on her, when she released the string, igniting the explosive tags. The wolves quickly evaporated, and Yakumo was sent hurtling into the forest. Nadare got slashed across the face with some debris from a tree and hissed, damn bitch. He ran towards the direction he saw Yakumo go and began to charge up chakra as he performed hand seals. Time to die, Konoha scum. Hinata ducked one of Fubuki's strikes and sent one of her own. She then sent a kick at Fubuki that was amplified with Jiyuken. Fubuki caught the kick, but screamed in pain as her hand felt like it was being stabbed by 100 white-hot needles. Hinata swept Fubuki off her feet and was about to deliver a strike to her sternum, only for Fubuki to flip back up and kick Hinata right in the jaw. That's it, Hyuga bitch, I am done playing with you. She ran through hand seals and took a deep breath. Mizore tried to dodge Kakashi and Kurenai's strikes, only to get knocked back down as the two Jonin ganged up on him. Kurenai leapt over him, Megan, Jubaku Satsu. Mizore's eyes widened as he felt tree roots wrap around his body. He struggled to get out of it, but before he could move, he heard the sound of 1,000 chirping birds. Kakashi ran at Mizore with his arm covered in lightning chakra, Reikiri, and thrust it at the Yuki nin's chest. Naruto. Naruto kicked open the door to Kyuubi's chamber and ran inside. The water splashed as he went in. Hey furball, wake thee up. There was a deep growling sound as a pair of red-slitted eyes opened. Well, if it isn't my beloved container, what is it you want, vermin? Naruto walked right up to the bars. I need chakra. Now, I can't reach my reserves, so I need to call on yours. Kyuubi raised one of his eyebrows. And just why, pray tell, would I ever consider giving you my chakra? Naruto glared at Kyuubi. Listen, you overgrown fleabag, I am currently trapped in a prison, waiting for my enemies to come and me. And last I checked, if I die, you understand where this is going. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes at the blonde, before he broke into a fit of laughter. Ha. Either you have got the biggest set of balls in the elemental nations, or the smallest set of brains. To talk to me, the Kyuubi no Yoko in such a manner would be damn near suicide. Who would have thought a runt like you would have the spine to backtalk me? Very well, I will give you my chakra. A wave of crimson flew out from behind the cage and wrapped around the blonde, seeping into his body. Naruto felt like screaming with how painful the chakra was, but held it in. Naruto's eyes finally shot open as they turned crimson red, and the mindscape began to disappear. Outside of mindscape, Koyuki was trembling in fear at the feel of the chakra coming off of Naruto. It felt like she was being smothered by a blanket of hate and evil as the crimson chakra around Naruto licked at everything around him. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were blood crimson and slitted. The nails on his hands and feet turned to claws, and his teeth had become fangs. He looked up at the locks binding him and with an undeniable force began to pull on the chains. They began to crack and bend as the strength behind Naruto tore them apart. Crack, snap, the chains on Naruto's right arm broke. He flexed his hand, then slashed his claws across the other chain. The link was still wrapped around it, but he could now move his arm willingly. The chakra suppressors burned off of his arms and fell to the floor. Naruto turned towards Koyuki and with a toothy grin asked, so, what was that about the situation being hopeless? Back with Team Kurenai, Nader finished the hand seals. Hyoten, Harumoka, the evaporated wolves began to form together to create a tiger made completely out of ice. Time to die, little girl. He snapped his fingers, and the tiger shot forward. Fubuki exhaled as she shouted, Hyoten, Hyro no Jutsu. Pillars of ice shot around Fubuki and went straight towards Hinata. Mizore closed his eyes as Kakashi came towards him with his Reikiri. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Yukumo was pulled out of the way of the tiger as it smashed into the ground where she was. Hinata was removed from the field of battle. Mizore was impaled by the Reikiri through his chest, ing him instantly. Nader and Fubuki saw an orange blur before it finally stopped, revealing Naruto Uzumaki, covered in a layer of crimson chakra. Koyuki, Hinata, and Yukumo were dropped on the ground as Naruto snarled at the two remaining Yuki nins, you two have some nerve trying to my teammates. Let's see how you fare against me. Naruto shot at them with blinding speed as he buried his fist in Nader's stomach. He then twisted and sent a fist at Fubuki's face. Nader coughed up some blood and pulled out a short katana and slashed at the blonde. Naruto whipped out a kunai and blocked the strike as he kicked at Nader. Fubuki came up behind and had a dagger shoot out of a port on her arm. She thrust her arm forward, about to shove it into Naruto's back. Naruto spun out of the way, causing Nader and Fubuki to clash blades before he kicked both of them in the face. They tumbled across the snow before they landed back on their feet and skidded back a couple meters. Naruto was about to attack again. Well, it seems I put too much faith in your little gang, Nader. Everyone looked up to see Dodo standing on a pillar of ice. I guess I have to take matters into my own hands. He held up his arm and pointed it at Nadare and Fubuki. Your services are no longer needed, Hyoten. Kokuryu Bofusetsu. A black ether-like dragon shot out of Dodo's arm and went directly towards Nadare and Fubuki. They held their arms up and tried to scream, but were engulfed in black ice as soon as the dragon hit its mark. The ice then shattered, leaving the two of them shattered in several pieces, frozen in the ice. Naruto's anger spiked, causing the red chakra to lash out even more. You bastard. Those were your subordinates, how can you be so cruel as to your own? Dodo chuckled as he began to remove his royal kimono. They failed to serve me, they had no more use to me. Is that such a hard concept to understand? Naruto roared as he charged at Dodo. He ran up the ice pillar as he aimed to drive his hand into Dodo's heart, only for his hand to be caught by a black glove as Dodo fully removed his kimono. Dodo smirked as he threw Naruto into a tree. This is the Mark II chakra armor. It is only a prototype, but it serves its purpose. Now, he turned towards Koyuki. Time to finish this. A pair of wings came out of his back as he swooped down and grabbed Koyuki. Naruto saw him fly in the air. Damn, I'll never catch him at this rate. He then saw the tree shaking. Wait a minute. He ran up the tree and pulled down on it. The tree wasn't all that flexible, but it would serve its purpose. He used his chakra to keep the tree from springing prematurely, then sent his chakra into his feet to shoot himself further as the tree threw him into the air. Naruto slammed into Dodo's wings, causing him to spin out of control into a deep bowl-shaped glacier. They all slammed into the icy ground, causing Dodo to let go of Koyuki, and for Naruto to slide into a pile of snow. Dodo stood up, and grinned as he saw where he was. Ha, looks like your plan failed. He grabbed Koyuki's necklace, which had fallen off during the crash, and ran to a small obelisk in the center of the ice formation. The treasure of the Kazuhana family is mine. He slammed the necklace into a keyhole, which it fit perfectly. Naruto stood up and winced as he coughed up a bit of blood, and the crimson chakra receded back into the seal. Damn, I can't call on that Baka Fox's chakra, shit. Naruto stood up and tried to think of a way he could win. I am all out of attacks, and any of the ones I have will be useless. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he remembered, he had one attack that would work. No, won't use his technique, I can't. Dodo turned towards Naruto and Koyuki. This ends here. Soon Yuki no Kuni shall rule all the elemental nations, the world will be mine. Ha 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 ha. Naruto glared at the man. He may not like most of Konoha, but it was his home, he couldn't just let it fall. Sighing, Naruto held out his hand. Damn me to hell for this. He focused his chakra into his palm and began to spin it, and forced it into a sphere-like shape. Damn, this attack isn't enough. And I never finished learning the final step. Naruto focused harder on the sphere. Come on, come on, come on. The sphere was covered in a shell as it stabilized. Naruto smirked. Good. Naruto held back his arm. Alright, time to finish you off, Dodo. Naruto charged towards the crazed villain with his technique being held in his hand. Dodo sneered and turned around. You fool, no one can stop me now, Hyoten, Soryu Bofusetsu. Two ether-like black dragons shot out of his hand and charged towards Naruto as he continued to run at Dodo. Naruto thrust his arm forward as the two dragons slammed into him, Rasengan, and tore right through the dragons. Naruto continued to charge towards Dodo, turning the dragons in slush as he neared the last male Kazuhana. Dodo swung his fist at Naruto, just as Naruto slammed the Rasengan into his sternum. There was an explosion of chakra as the Rasengan smashed into the chakra armor, sending large amounts of sharp debris everywhere. Team Kurenai ran over the hill just in time to see the explosion, when the entire area was covered in a rainbow aura. A series of pillars shattered, revealing heating panels frozen beneath them. The snow began to melt, and grass was shown as the snow melted away. Dodo gasped for breath as he looked around. This was it. He stumbled back as the light in his eyes began to dim. "Ik killed my br brother for this." The light completely went out in Dodo's eyes as he fell over, dead. Naruto collapsed to his knees as he looked at his hand. It was burned from the chakra in the Rasengan. The Kyuubi would fix it in a couple of hours. Koyuki stood and walked over to the blonde. "Come on, Naruto." She hoisted his arm over her shoulder. "Let's go." They began to walk up the hill as Team Kurenai ran towards them. Back in Konoha, Hiyashi groaned as he walked out of Hitomi's bedroom, groaning in pain. "Man, last night was hectic." He rubbed his wrists, which were scarred from the rope burns. "Damn, that hurts." He went to grab some soothing cream from Hitomi's cabinet and rubbed it where the rope burns were. Finally, after taking care of his injuries, he went to grab some coffee, but stopped remembering Hitomi's obsession with buying coffee from certain shops. With that in mind, he just took a glass of water and splashed himself in the face to wake himself up. He sat on the couch and looked out the window. Well, Minato was right about one thing. A perverted grin came to his face. "I did enjoy that." Hitomi walked out of her room, wearing her housecoat and smiling. "Ah, I had so much fun last night, Hiyashi-kun. We should do this more often." She smiled as she began to use her fingers to walk up Hiyashi's arm as she sat on the couch. "Maybe if we're lucky, I can get that child I always wanted." Hiyashi groaned. "Please don't say that. I am already going nuts with the ones I have now." Hanabi is crazy when she gets too much sugar in her system, and unfortunately, that I all she wants to eat. Sigh, I regret allowing her to eat sweets. Hitomi giggled. "Ah, but you know you can't resist that cute puppy dog expression on little Han-chan's face, can you?" Hiyashi chuckled. "True, I can't." He sat back and looked out the window. It had a perfect view of the Hokage monument. "Ah, didn't Hikari come here often to look at the monument?" Hitomi nodded. Yes, as a matter of fact she did. She always scowled at the Sandame's face for some reason. Hiyashi quirked an eyebrow. Did she now? He looked up to the Sandame's face. Only one side of his face was visible, his left eye was clearly noticeable. Hiyashi sighed and leaned back. When his own eyes turned back to the Sandame's face, wait a minute, Hikari viewed sinners in certain categories. She viewed all those who had forsaken their duties for their own gain as sinners. So, he turned towards the Sandame. In the eye of the sinner, the Sandame's eye. He shot up and ran towards the door. "Sorry, Hitomi, gotta go by." Hitomi stared after Hiyashi as he ran into the streets towards the Hokage Tower. Why didn't he grab his clothes? Hokage Tower. Minato sighed as he read through Ibiki and Inoichi's reports. With all this stacked against you, Hiruzen, execution is a definite outcome. Kushina passed him a cup of coffee and sat down in the chair in front of his desk. Kushina shook her head. What happened to this village in our absence? Minato sighed as he turned his chair around to look out the window. It went to hell, that's what. Hey, wait, sir. Oh my god, put some. Minato and Kushina turned around as they heard shouting in the lobby, and the door was kicked off its hinges, leaving a small cloud to cover the person. They watched as the cloud disappeared to see who it was, and their eyes widened in total shock. Hiyashi was standing in the doorway, wearing nothing but a morning gown. He was sweating, so the morning gown now slung to his chest. Minato, Kushina, I figured out the riddle. He waited to see what their reactions would be, only to raise an eyebrow as they had their mouths hanging in disgust. Why are you looking at me like that? Kushina pointed to below Hiyashi's waist as she covered her eyes. Hiyashi was confused and looked down, only for his own eyes to widen. Somebody get me some pants. He covered himself up and grabbed a nearby curtain to cover himself. Minato groaned as he smashed his head on the desk. I am now officially scarred for life. Kushina agreed with his statement as she pressed the comm link and had somebody go fetch some clothes. If they were going to be in a meeting, then they needed to be presentable. 20 minutes later, Hiyashi was nervously sitting in the chair, wearing a pair of clothes that had been brought up. Kushina and Minato were still twitching in disgust. Okay, Hiyashi, what is the answer to the riddle? Hiyashi sighed as he leaned forward. I am guessing that Hitomi hid the next piece in the Sandame's left eye on the monument. She definitely would have viewed the Sandame as a sinner after discovering his lies. Kushina nodded her head. All right, that would make sense, but how are we going to get the next piece? The monument is unstable as is from the invasion damage. So digging in the monument would be a bad idea. Hiyashi nodded. Yes, it would, but knowing Hitomi, she would have likely set up a seal where she could hide the documents. The problem is that she could have hidden it anywhere in the Sandame's eye. Minato smirked. Well then, we had better get to work then, right? Kushina nodded as she grabbed Hiyashi by the back of his shirt. Come on Hiyashi Baka, you're coming with us. Hiyashi grumbled, but why do I have to go? Naruto sighed as he took a drink from the glass of wine that had been presented to him by one of the many servants of the now Queen Koyuki. After he had defeated Dodo, Koyuki had realized how foolish it was to keep running away from her position and took back her throne. In turn, Naruto had been welcomed as a hero for protecting the princess. His team was given similar arrangements. Naruto looked to see several servants doting on Hinata, bringing her fine drinks, perfectly cooked cinnamon buns. Yukumo was being offered sweet rolls and pieces of art. Kurenai was being offered rare wines and even fine jewelry. A few of the male servants were gazing at her with eyes filled with admiration for her beauty, while females were begging her for tips. Naruto, however, was getting treatment worthy of a prince. Every servant girl was coming on to him, begging for marriage, some even asking to bear his child. He was being offered dishes that would make the daimyo go green with envy. He was basically being treated as if he were the crown prince of Yuki no Kuni. Koyuki stood up and spoke aloud. People of Yuki no Kuni, your queen has returned, but had it not been for the actions of these young individuals, I most certainly would have been. She indicated to Team Kurenai. On the other side of the room, Kakashi was watching with a smile as he saw Naruto be doted upon by the servants. It warmed his heart that Naruto had become so popular. Everybody was cheering loudly, praising the heroes to the country. In fact, they were so distracted by their happiness that they never saw the look of contemplation on Naruto's face as he looked at all the various windows. That night, they each had been given their own separate rooms that were fit for royalty. Each one with a servant awaiting them on the outside of the door should any of them need anything. The one outside of Naruto's door was happily humming to herself, loving the fact that she had been chosen to attend to Naruto's needs. She slowly turned her head towards the door, and her eyes began to feel droopy. She fully closed them and began to fall over, only for her to be caught in a dark figure's arms before she was set up in her chair. The figure adjusted the pack on his back as he ran down the hallway. The figure ducked and weaved through the corridors of the great palace, dodging past servants walking through the halls as the figure headed down a massive hallway. The figure suddenly stopped at the last door and gently pushed it open, revealing a great balcony, and right below, a soft patch of earth he could land on. The figure ran to the edge and was about to hoist himself over. And just where do you think you're going? The figure froze as he turned around to see Koyuki herself standing there in her kimono. Naruto. The figure stiffened as he turned towards Koyuki, and then sighed as he moved out of the shadow, revealing that he was in fact Naruto. Hello Koyuki-sama, I was just taking a walk out, The queen stopped him as she interrupted his excuse. Don't lie to me, Naruto. You aren't good at it. Even if you were good at it, the fact you are carrying a pack on your walk would not convince me. Naruto cursed before he looked at the daimyo. What do you want? She stepped forward. Naruto, why are you trying to run away? Naruto sat on the edge and sighed, scratching his head. For the same reason you did, I want to get away from my problems. Is that so wrong? Koyuki gave him a sad look as she walked over to him and sat at his side. Naruto, I learned that running away from your problems is not the answer. If you keep running, your problems will eventually catch up to you. Naruto sighed and looked at Koyuki. Maybe for you, but for me, running away might be the best option. Koyuki looked at Naruto with a pained expression. Naruto, nothing is ever solved by running. Naruto snorted and glanced at Koyuki. You don't know shit about what I went through, so you have no room to lecture. Koyuki sat at his side and wrapped her arm around his shoulders. Maybe not, but let me ask you this, is running away worth the pain you will cause the ones you love, who love you? Naruto stiffened as Koyuki continued, will breaking their hearts really be worthy running away? Naruto looked down and thought of everyone who cared about him, Loli, the local bums, Tsuki, Ayame, Iruka, Hinata, Yakumo, even Kurenai. Would he be willing to hurt them just to be free of Konoha? Koyuki stood up and kissed his head. Just think about it. She turned and headed back to her room, leaving the young Jinchuriki to his thoughts. In Konoha, Hiashi, Kushina, and Minato were walking towards the Hokage mountain, and headed up the path that lead to the Sandame's head. They had so far reached no resistance as far as traps and other such things, it was almost too easy. Upon their arrival to the Sandame's head, they found themselves inside a great hollow room. As they looked around, they noticed the large crack that went through the Sandame's head. Inside the crack was a series of wires holding the monument in place, but some of the wires just did not seem necessary. Hiashi walked up to the crack and looked at the wires. Most of them led up to the Sandame's eye. He raised an eyebrow as he activated his Byakugan. What the, oh boy! His eyes completely widened as he saw inside the wall. Inside the wall were a series of wires and cables, each one covered in a myriad of seals. All the way up to the eye, it surrounded a ring that was inside the rock. He could tell that the ring was hollow, and on the inside was a piece of paper, so that's where she hid it. He looked back at Naruto and Kushina. The next piece of paper is inside a ring surrounding the Sandame's eye. Kushina grinned as she ran towards the wall. Then what are we waiting for? Hiashi screamed as he jumped in front of Kushina. Cushion ahhhhh. Kushina smashed into him and sent him flying towards the wall. As he smashed into it, he was sent flying forwards by an invisible force towards the other side of the room. He groaned in pain as he fell off the wall and 2 teeth came out of his mouth. Kushina scratched the back of her head. Sorry Hiashi. Hiashi glared at Kushina. I hate you. Minato grabbed Hiashi by his shirt and hoisted him up. Oh, get over it Hiashi, I have done worse to you. Hiashi glared at Minato and snapped his head away as he grumbled about, stupid blondes. Minato sighed and looked at the wall. So, why the hell did that happen? Hiashi sighed and rubbed one of his temples. The cables feed off of chakra in the air and stone around them, thus creating an invisible gravity field. My wife made them before she died, saying she wanted to use them for something. I guess this would explain why every time I activated my Byakugan I would see a small blip of chakra on the mountain. I always assumed it was a bird or something. Kushina stared at Hiashi. How can there be chakra in the air and stone? Hiashi turned towards Kushina. All things have chakra, some just more usable than others. For example, an animal is capable of utilizing its chakra, as can trees and plants. But their usage is limited, so not many people know this. Humans are the only ones, besides demons, that can fully utilize chakra to its greatest extent. However, one very skilled in chakra control can easily take the chakra particles around them and convert it to their own chakra. Sages and certain weapons are capable of this feat. Minato looked at Hiyashi. Is there any way to shut down the field so that we can get to the ring? The Hyuga head sighed as he scratched his head, then his eyes lit up. He activated his Byakugan and looked around the room. Kushina and Minato watched as he began to trace his hands over the walls. If I know Hana, which I know I do, then she would have left something to explain things. And if the point of where the paper is hidden, and where the wires are coming from are correct, then the message should be right. He stopped and grinned. Here. Minato and Kushina walked over to where Hiyashi was and looked. There was a series of intricate writings in the wall, but it was no language they had ever seen. Hiyashi looked at the writings, and sweat dropped. Oh boy, not another one. Minato turned towards Hiyashi. What are we looking at? Hiyashi sighed and stood up. My wife had a tendency to write random gibberish around her words. It was her way of coding things. But the way she did it was so thorough that not even Konoha's best translators could figure the stuff out. He sighed and hit his head on the rock wall. She did the same thing for her vows on our wedding day. Also, it takes her a little while to remember what each gibberish word means. Hiyashi sighed and laid against the wall. Kushina and Minato sat down and looked towards Hiyashi. So, any chance we might be able to figure out the message? Hiyashi narrowed his eyes in a thinking pose. I know. He shot up and headed towards the exit. I have to go get her diary. Minato and Kushina stared at Hiyashi's retreating figure in mild confusion. After all, it wasn't every day you saw a grown man run outside screaming for his wife's diary. Kushina looked at Minato. Want to go get some ramen? Minato sighed and stood up. Sure. Why not? Maybe it will calm me down enough to think. He stood up and headed towards the exit, all the while thinking of how he was going to convince Naruto that they were his parents. Naruto, my son. In Konoha Hospital, Tsunade stood at her desk, looking through the various medical documents of her godson. She had tear stains on her face from so much crying, and she had a large keg of sake at her side. Shizune sat at a table, downing another cup of sake. Tsunade saw Shizune downing a cup and frowned. Shizune, that isn't good for you. It was odd hearing Tsunade lecturing Shizune when it was usually the other way around. The dark-haired medic Nin hiccuped and looked at her mentor. Well, Hiccup, what do you expect me to do? After seeing, Hiccup, Naruto's files, burp. She groaned as she felt the alcohol start to affect her as she cried a bit. Tsunade-sama, why do we have to keep looking at those files? I don't want to do this anymore. Tsunade bit her lower lip as she looked at her apprentice and adopted niece. She may have been able to stomach blood a lot more than Tsunade, but Shizune really loved kids. For Shizune, seeing a single child in pain was like an endless torture. Tsunade walked over to Shizune and grasped her hand. Shizune, if you really want to, you can head home for the night. I can take things from here. But make sure that you have somebody with you when you go home. Kami knows what could happen to you whilst you are drunk. Shizune smiled. Thank you Tsunade-sama. She got up and was about to head towards the door. Crash. When the door was suddenly slammed open as Sakura came waltzing in. She walked up to Tsunade's desk and smashed her fists on it. Take me as your apprentice. Shizune and Tsunade stared at Sakura. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and snarled at her. What did you just say? Sakura snorted in arrogance. You heard me. I want you to take me as your apprentice. If I train under you, Sasuke will view me as a worthy wife and love me. Shizune narrowed in her eyes in disgust. you want Tsunade-sama to give away her prized techniques so you can impress a boy. She turned towards Tsunade. Is this what kunoichi have been reduced to since we left? Sakura pointed at Shizune and spat in an arrogant tone. Learn your place, bitch. I am better than you, and Tsunade should be honored to take me, the future wife of the last Uchiha, as her apprentice. Tsunade stood up and released a large amount of intent, making Sakura quiver and soil herself. Tsunade sneered at the Haruno and pointed towards the door. Get out, now. The shout was so loud and so powerful that it sent Sakura tumbling off of her feet. She scurried towards the door and ran out, but not before sending a final glare at the two kunoichi. As soon as the door closed, Tsunade smashed her fist into the desk. That bitch, how dare she just waltz in here and demand to become my apprentice? Shizune snarled and shook her head. To think, Kakashi allowed a kunoichi hopeful under his care to turn out like her. The worthless little, Shizune roared in anger and punched the wall, leaving a small crater and sending a large amount of spiderweb cracks through it. Tsunade sighed and sat down. I better get to work. She pressed a button on her PA. Aide, could you possibly have Tenzo escort Shizune home for me? A voice came over the comm. Of course, Tsunade-sama. There was a click and in a few moments, a man with spiky brown hair, a traditional Jonin uniform, and a headpiece very similar to Tsunade's granduncle appeared in the room. The man smiled at Shizune. Shizune-san, I am here to escort you home. Shizune smiled and walked towards the door. Okay, come on then. She opened the door and headed out. A week later, Naruto stood on the front of the ship and looked out. It was over a week since he had thought over Koyuki's statement to him, and ultimately he had decided to stay, if only to protect the ones he cared for. Loli, the local bums, Tsuki, Ayame, his new team. He may dislike the village, but if those few precious people remained, he could tolerate them, just for a little while. He looked over the boat edge and smiled as he saw the incoming land. Time to go home. Back in Konoha, Suna entourage. The Suna entourage that went with Tamari had chosen to stay as long as Tamari was in the village. She had rented a condo and had constantly been trying to get closer to Naruto. But it was to almost no avail. Naruto still believed that the Yondaime was trying to hurt him and was using Tamari to do so. She couldn't really blame him for being paranoid, but how long could someone be offered love and still consider it a trap? Not even her brother was that paranoid. Tamari was sitting on the roof, gazing at the sky as she thought about the blonde that she had fallen for, that she begged the council to allow her to marry, the one who had stolen her heart. Tamari. She snapped her head to see her brother, Gaara, walk up on top of the roof. You should head inside, it is getting cold out. Tamari smiled at Gaara and shook her head. No, I think I will stay out here. Gaara sighed and walked up to his sister and sat at her side. So, when do you think he will accept? Tamari flinched and looked down. Honestly, I don't know Otudo. She laid back and stared at the sky. I feel my heart break just a little more each time he turns me down. That same cold look in his eyes every time I tell him how I feel. She wiped away a few coming tears. I just don't know what to do anymore. Gaara placed his arm around his sister's shoulders. Tamari, slam. The two siblings turned their head to see their other sibling Kankuro waving his arms and shouting. Damn it, Gaara, how long is it going to take to get Nisan inside? I am hungry. Gaara glared at his brother. Kankuro, I can't just. Gaara suddenly stopped as he suddenly felt something intent leaking from his sister. Tamari was twitching as she gave Kankuro a sickeningly sweet smile. Oh Kankuro, what have I told you about using my makeup to put on your war paint? Kankuro instantly froze. He could have sworn he saw the Shinigami right over his sister's shoulders. Kankuro. That night, The screams of the oldest male of the Sand siblings was heard throughout Konoha, and part of Iowa. With Minato, Kushina, and Hiashi. Kushina and Minato were staring at Hiashi as he came into the Hokage Tower, carrying a box full of diaries written by his wife. Minato, reluctantly, decided to speak up first. Hiashi, what are you doing? Hiashi groaned and set the box down. My wife had a tendency to write her special codes in the backs of her diaries. Unfortunately, she changed her codes every few weeks, so it was incredibly difficult to keep up with them, even when we tried to learn them. Eventually, we decided to just give up and just have her explain her writing. Unfortunately for us, I don't know which one has the new set of codes, so we have to look through all these diaries to find them. Hiashi went and grabbed a diary and was about to start reading it. Found it. He looked up to see Kushina holding up a piece of paper with all the letters for each of his wife's codes, including the one written in the rocks. He snatched the paper and read through them. Minato grinned and stood up. Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's go translate your wife's gibberish. He ran out the door, dragging Hiashi behind him while Kushina followed up behind. 10 minutes later, a whip-lashed Hiashi was reading the numerals, all the while ranting at Kushina and Minato. I can't believe you threw me up the monument, there are stairs for a reason, Minato. Minato rolled his eyes. Oh please, you survived, didn't you? Hiashi turned around, revealing twigs being in his hair. Yeah, but you threw me headfirst into a ing bush, you jackass. Kushina smacked him upside the head. Less talky, more translatee. Hiashi turned towards Kushina. Translatee isn't even a word. Kushina patted him on the back. And milky white isn't in the eye color spectrum, now move. Hiashi narrowed his eyes at Kushina and continued with the translation. Once he finished, he sighed in relief. All right, now to see what my wife wrote. The three gathered around and looked over Hiashi's shoulder. Dear reader, you have found out the scriptures, here is how to get the scroll. Someone needs to climb up the wall and flick the switch located in the Sandame's eye. After that, just apply a few explosive notes around the eye, minimum strength on explosive notes. The three stared at the paper. Kushina and Minato then looked at Hiashi. Said Hyuga shivered as the two grabbed him by the shoulders. Oh Kami no. 3 minutes later, Hiashi Hyuga was lying on the ground, sizzling as he stared at the ceiling. Switches flicked. Ouch. Kushina smiled and patted him on his burnt head. Thanks Ishii, now we just need to get the scroll out of there. Minato had already set up a few explosive notes around the eye hole. Once the last one was in place, he jumped down and shouted, "Fire in the hole." Boom. The wall sent rocks all over the place, several of them hitting the still sizzling Hiashi. Once the smoke cleared, it revealed the holding port of the piece of paper. Minato and Kushina quickly grabbed it and cracked it open. Inside was the official document of marriage that showed that Naruto was their legitimate child, but they still needed the birth certificate, and the document showing all those who were witness to Naruto's birth. There was also one more piece of paper, in Hikari's handwriting. Kushina and Minato walked over to Hiashi, who was sitting up from his injuries. He saw the paper and snatched it out and looked at the paper. Okay, now what is this riddle? If you have managed to get this far, then there is no need for me to speak in riddles anymore. But I will do so, just to be on the safe side. The final piece is in the final battle between titans, and the border between two lives. Walking towards the gates of Konoha were Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, Yakumo Kurama, Kurenai Yuhi, and Kakashi Hatake. After arriving at port from finishing up with their mission, they quickly made all haste to get to Konoha. Kakashi and Naruto were the only ones who dreaded going to Konoha. Kakashi, because he knew the punishment that awaited him from his actions, added with how pissed off the Hyuga clan was going to be because he impersonated their heiress. Naruto, because he did not want to deal with their bullshit. As they walked past the gates, the two Chunin guards Kotetsu and Izumo smiled towards Naruto, but they frowned as he gave them a single cold glance before walking off. The two guards watched as the group walked away, and sighed sadly as they looked at each other. Poor kid. I remember when that guy would go around pranking everyone left and right. Now, Kotetsu looked back at Naruto. Izumo finished. Now Naruto is almost as emo as the Uchiha brat. He sneered as he said it. The two Chunin had never liked the Uchiha. He was so arrogant that it just made them sick. Kotetsu winced and sat back in his chair. Yeah. I sure hope he gets out of his funk soon. Izumo stuck his feet atop the table and sighed, looking up at the clouds. Same here, same here. Hokage Tower. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki were staring at the desk in front of them, the two documents they had found being laid in front of them. The first was the document they found at Hitomi's place, all the details of Naruto's birth, height, weight, blood type, hair color, eye color, fertility rating at birth, and everything else a doctor might write down for a newborn child. The second was the document found in the Sandame's eye, the official certificate of marriage that showed that Minato and Kushina were officially married, and that any children the two had were legitimate heirs. But it still was not enough. They needed to find the last two documents, otherwise, all of their hard work would have been for naught. Kushina looked up at Minato. What do we do, Minato-koi? Hiyashi is the only one who understands Hana's riddles, and Kushina looked down as she whimpered, I want my baby back. She fell to her knees sobbing lightly as Minato wrapped her in a warm hug. I know Kushi-chan, I know, but until Hiyashi wakes up, we aren't going to be able to find out where the last two documents are. For now, we just have to be patient. Kushina sniffled and nodded her head, oh okay, and stood up. Knock, knock. Minato and Kushina turned towards the door as they heard knocking on the other side of it. Enter. As the door opened, Minato and Kushina's eyes widened to see Team Kurenai, and Kakashi. Minato turned his gaze towards Kakashi, and narrowed his eyes as he noticed the guilty posture Kakashi was holding. He then looked towards the others, and frowned as he saw that his son, Naruto, was tapping his foot in irritation, as if he had no desire to be here. Oh my child, he sighed and looked towards Kurenai. Report, was your mission a success? Kurenai stepped forward. Hi, Yondaime-sama, and we also managed to do more than just succeed the mission. She stepped forward and pulled out a scroll. It would appear that Yukie Fujikaze was actually the heir to the throne of Yuki no Kuni. She placed the scroll on Minato's desk. She has offered an alliance with Konoha. All the details are in the scroll. Minato picked up the scroll, and nodded his head as he saw the seal of the royal family of Yuki no Kuni on the scroll, signifying it as a legitimate scroll. Very good, anything else to report? Kurenai nodded and turned towards Kakashi. As a matter of fact there is, but I believe my team should leave for now so that they may get some rest. Minato nodded his head. Very well. He turned towards the three genin. You are all dismissed. All three nodded and left, but none more quickly than Naruto. Minato sighed as the door closed, and then turned his gaze towards Kurenai and Kakashi. Now, what else is it you needed to report? Kurenai sighed and turned towards Kakashi. It would appear that Kakashi here saw fit to disobey your orders regarding staying away from Naruto, abandoned his precious apprentice to try and take claim of Naruto's training, and as an added bonus, impersonated the Hyuga heiress. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as both Minato and Kushina twitched as they looked towards Kakashi. Kushina looked at Kurenai. Kurenai, would you be so kind as to leave? We have some things to discuss with Kakashi, alone. Kurenai wasted no time and bolted from the office. Minato then looked at Kakashi. Kakashi, I have given you your precious Uchiha, I have removed the so-called Dobi from your command, I have even given you full reign to teach him whatever you wish so long as the skills you are teaching him do not directly belong to a clan or dojo, and all I ask in return is that you stay away from my son. Minato smashed his fist into the already broken desk in front of him, and you can't even do that right. Kakashi shivered at the sudden burst of ki being thrown at him. Minato-sensei, please I. Kakashi fell to one knee as Minato unleashed furthering intent on Kakashi. That's Hokage-sama to you. He stood up and walked over to Kakashi. You not only abandoned your apprentice, and interfered with another Jonin's training methods and mission, but you also impersonated the Hyuga heiress. Kakashi shivered and looked at Minato. I needed to. Naruto would never have taken any training from me, it was the only way I could have. Crunch. Kakashi was silenced as Kushina buried a fist in his face, breaking his nose. Only way you could have what? Stunted his growth further. Destroy any trust he has left in his own generation. Is that what you want? Kushina shouted as she grabbed Kakashi by the throat. You have done more harm than good in the last 6 months, and you are still trying to cause more harm, you bastard. Kakashi lowered his head as he was dropped to his knees. Minato pressed a button on the intercom. Aide, send my Anbu here to pick up Kakashi, level 6 protocol. Kakashi's eyes widened as he looked up towards Minato. Level 6 protocol was used for prisoners who were too dangerous to be left unscathed before their trial. So they had most of their abilities sealed, or directly removed. In other words, Kakashi would be Sharingan no Kakashi, no more. As the Anbu arrived, his fears increased as he heard Minato state, no mercy. Kakashi's screams of terror echoed as he was dragged away. With Naruto. Naruto sighed as he walked through the village, hiding his face so he would not have to deal with the annoying members of the populace, basically everyone. Behind him, Yakumo and Hinata sighed as Naruto tried his hardest to avoid stupid members of the populace. Hinata was glaring at every girl that kept casting glances at Naruto, and Yakumo was working her hardest to keep Hinata from going off ending them. Finally, the three ended up in the part of town people rarely went, right in front of Ichiraku's ramen. Finally. I am starving. Naruto sighed and walked up to the counter. Ayame, 3 bowls of miso, 2 bowls of chicken, and a single bowl of beef, oh, and a salt ramen to go. Ayame smiled and nodded. Hi Naruto, it's good to have you back. She bent over and grabbed the stuff as Tsuki came out from the back. Yeah, while we have been getting quite a bit of business, most of our customers are downright annoying. He looks at the clock. Luckily, most of the annoying customers won't be here for another half hour or so. Naruto sighed and rubbed his head. Perfect. On second thought, get all of that to go. Ayame sighed sadly as she began to get all the to-go bowls ready. Tsuki also sighed. Nowadays, Naruto rarely stayed long enough for them to enjoy their usual conversations. He just came, grabbed his food, and left. Tsuki cursed the Yondaime for revealing the information that Naruto was his son. Now the entire village, which hated and abused him, was now worshipping him as if he was Kami's gift to mankind. It was despicable. Ring. Tsuki looked up as the bell rang, signifying somebody entered the store. A blonde-haired girl with 4 pigtails, wearing a Suna-style kunoichi garb. She also had a large fan on her back. She looked like she was depressed as she sat down at the counter. 2 bowls of beef ramen please, and a bottle of sake. Tsuki raised his eyebrow at the girl, who was clearly no older than 15, 16 at a maximum. Aren't you a little young to be drinking? The girl sighed and let her head fall. Old enough to drink and have. Tsuki sighed. Right, he went back and started to get the beef ramen ready while Ayame placed the bottle of sake in front of her. The girl sighed and popped the cork on top of the sake bottle, and quickly downed the alcoholic beverage. What am I going to do? Naruto still thinks that I am just using him, and I have no way to prove to him otherwise. Tamari sighed as she downed another gulp of sake. Nobody noticed anyone enter the ramen stand, with a hateful glare on their face. Naruto grabbed the bag Ayame had placed in front of him and was about to leave, when he was grabbed by the shoulder as he was forcibly turned around, and a fist buried in his face. Crunch! Naruto's nose broke as the person grabbed him by his hair and threw him out of the ramen stand and into the street. Ayame screamed as she saw the ramen fly everywhere as the assailant hit Naruto, causing him to throw his ramen everywhere. Tamari, Hinata and Yakumo quickly ran out after Naruto as whoever attacked him stalked towards the fallen blonde. Naruto groaned as he sat up to see who had attacked him, and his eyes widened. Sasuke. Sasuke Uchiha was in fact standing in front of him, a look of hatred contorting his face. Fight me, Dobi. The ruckus in the street caused many people to crowd over to see what was going on. Look, the last Uchiha is challenging the Yondaimi's son. The Uchiha is a fool thinking he can challenge the might of the Namikaze clan. Still, it will be fun to watch him get his kicked. I bet on the Yondaimi's son. Naruto sneered in disgust at the people, before he stood up and turned towards Sasuke. What the hell are you talking about, Sasuke? Sasuke snarled and ran towards him. I said fight me. He swung his fist at the blonde, who ducked out of the way as he swung a kick at Sasuke, who quickly blocked it. Off to the side, Hinata, Yakumo, Tamari, and several other people were watching Naruto with worry. The local bums and loli wanted to run in there and beat the shit out of the Uchiha, but too many people were in their way for them to get to him. Sasuke swung his fist, and managed to smash it into Naruto's jaw before he delivered a heavy kick to Naruto's chest, knocking the wind out of him. Sasuke grinned and grabbed Naruto by the blonde hair atop his head, and yanked him up. Is that the best you can do? And smashed his knee in Naruto's face, sending him flying back several feet. Naruto-kun. Both Tamari and Hinata shouted as they tried to get past the crowds of people who wanted to see the heirs of the two most powerful clans fight each other. Naruto groaned in pain as he stood up, and glared at the Uchiha. Why the air you doing this? Sasuke snapped. Because I want to prove to the Yondaime that I would be a far better son than you. Then he will give me the power I need to my traitorous brother. Everyone looked at the blonde to see what his reaction would be. What they saw was not what they expected, nor something they would ever forget. Naruto's fists clenched as his hair covered his eyes. He shook rapidly as he sneered towards Sasuke, for the last time. His nails slowly began to lengthen. His teeth began to sharpen as the air around him began to thicken with malice. A red aura began to trail over his body. The son of Naruto's head snapped up, revealing crimson red eyes with demonic black slits, filled with hatred. The Yondaime. An explosion of red chakra sent dust and debris flying everywhere, and terrified all those watching. Sasuke almost soiled himself at the feel of the ki, and the sight of a nine-tailed fox in Naruto's silhouette. Suddenly, Naruto vanished out of nowhere, and Sasuke was thrown through several wooden walls, with 5 slash marks in his cheek. Where Sasuke once stood, Naruto had his arm held out, and from his claws, blood dripped from the tips. He threw his head back and opened his mouth, RWOOAAWWRRR, and let loose a terrifying roar before he charged after Sasuke, with intent to Hokage Tower. Minato and Kushina froze as they felt the dark bloodthirsty chakra of the Kyuubi no Yoko, and looked out the window. Their eyes widened in shock as they saw a bright red aura in the center of the village. Okami no. The two quickly leapt out the window towards the red aura, hoping to get there in time. Back with Naruto, Sasuke crashed into a wooden pillar as he coughed up a large glob of blood, before he was grabbed by his hair and his face slammed right into a pile of wood, sending splinters into his face. Naruto sneered and yanked the Uchiha up. Is that all you've got? He kicked Sasuke in the stomach, making him cough up more blood as he smashed through another wooden wall. Naruto snarled hatefully as he walked after the Uchiha, who was now scrambling to get to his feet in an attempt to run away, only for Naruto to grab him by the back of his throat and yank him up, squeezing him tightly as the red Yuki of the Kyuubi began to burn the skin of the last Uchiha. Ah! Sasuke cried out in pain as he felt his skin begin to burn and melt at the same time from the corrosive touch of the Yuki. Naruto raised his other hand, the claws seeming to grow longer and sharper as he sneered, "Die! Sasuke!" He swung his claws, about to rip open the Uchiha's throat. "Stop!" Naruto's wrists were grabbed from behind as he was yanked off of Sasuke, while a piece of paper was applied to his forehead, and the red chakra of the Kyuubi receded back into the seal. As Naruto passed out, he was lifted up in the arms of Kushina Uzumaki, while Minato Namikaze removed the seal on Naruto's forehead, before he snapped his head towards those who had watched as Naruto unleashed the Kyuubi's power. Would somebody mind telling me why none of you bothered to try and top this? One of the shinobi up front spoke up, Yondaime-sama, we wanted to see your son put the Uchiha in his place where he belongs. There were many cheers from the rest of the crowd, who shouted in agreement. Kushina, however, did not, so a fight of superiority is worth the risk of the Kyuubi breaking out of the seal. Do none of you realize what could have happened? The entire crowd went silent as Kushina continued. If my son released enough of Kyuubi's Yuki, he could have completely transformed into the Kyuubi itself. The crowd went silent as they looked down in shame. Kushina scoffed as she turned towards the direction of the hospital, carrying her son with her. Minato was about to follow her, when he turned towards the Uchiha, who was trying to get up. He grabbed Sasuke by the front of his shirt and released enough ki to make the Uchiha freeze in his grip. If you ever, and I mean ever, attack my son again, he squeezed the Uchiha, making him gasp in pain. I will finish the job your brother started, and threw him to the ground in a heap, before he quickly followed after his wife. The crowd slowly dispersed, until only Hinata, Yakumo, Tamari Ayame, Tsuki, the local bums, and Loli were left. Time skip 3 days. Hospital. Minato and Kushina sighed as they sat in the room of their son, who was laying unconscious, hooked up to several IV needles to provide him with nutrients while he slept. Minato sighed as he clutched his head. How did it come this far? How? He stood up and leaned against the wall as his wife tried to comfort him. Now Minato-kun, don't worry. I'm sure Naruto will be fine. She looks over to her child and sighs. Maybe if he stays here, he will be safe as we look for the last 2 documents. Minato shook his head. If what the doctors told me is true, he won't be out for much longer, and even if we tie him up in chakra-enhanced cuffs he is going to get out of this hospital, if he has to drag the hospital room itself with him. Kushina looked down sadly and sat down on the chair in the room, and took out the 2 documents they had found. They had half of what they needed to prove Naruto was their son, but without the other half, it was all meaningless. As Kushina looked at the papers, she held it up towards the window, and she quirked an eye. There were lines going across the paper. They were faint, but they were there. She looked at Minato. Minato-koi, look. Minato walked over and looked at the papers, his eyes quirked. The lines were clearly those of a seal array, but they looked to have been applied afterward. as he had no recollection of having seals applied to the documents. He took the paper and looked at it. He recognized the seal, but he just could not place where he had seen it before. Minato then noticed something. He flipped the two papers over and placed them next to each other. His eyes widened at what it was. It wasn't a seal, it was a special series of numerals and data, but what the hell was it doing on the papers? Kushina looked closer at them. Row 7, column C, shelf 6, book 45, page 97. She looked at Minato and raised an eyebrow. What the hell does that? Minato koi. Minato groaned as he grabbed his forehead. Why that place, that book, and that page? He turned and smashed his head into the wall. Damn you, Hana. Kushina looked at Minato with concern. Minato koi, what is it? Minato sighed and walked out the door. You'll find out when we get there. Minato walked out of the hospital and towards his least favorite place on earth. The Konoha Public Library.